welcome to Seasons of Justice, where faith meets action. I'm Kevin Thompson, and in each episode we explore how the sacred call to justice is being lived out in real time across our churches. Today, I'm pleased to be in conversation with someone whose leadership is already shifting culture across the Church of England, Birmingham, and whose voice carries both conviction and deep compassion. But before we dive into today's themes, let me introduce our guest. The Revd Canon Wayne Hamilton is the newly appointed chair of the Birmingham Racial Justice Board. He also serves as a non-stipendiary associate priest at St. James's Church in Handsworth, with his wife, Reverend Barbara Hamilton, who is also a non-stipendiary associate priest. Wayne has been working for over 30 years as a care manager in the private healthcare sector and is a father of 4 children and a grandfather to a few grandchildren. Wayne has launched and is part of a few men's groups and continues to promote togetherness in our community. Wayne plays the saxophone in a Birmingham jazz band called the Notebenders. Reverend Wayne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So let's start with talking about rooting the working community. Some recent comments that you made to the West Midlands Racial Justice Initiative, you shared your commitment to uniting community engagement and expanding partnerships with the lived experiences of those most affected by inequity as your compass. And I just wanted to ask, why is community engagement such a core part of your approach for the Birmingham Racial Justice Board? And how do we avoid the trap of performative inclusion?
Wonderful questions. I'm not sure I can answer them, but here we go. So community is a big deal. And families, togetherness, and the wholeness of communicating with people is what we all live for. We live to be united and in fellowship with others. But obviously there's a challenge in doing that because we are so different. Yet we're looking for some commonality that we can work together and socialize together and just enjoy fellowship in Christ with one another.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. And how do we avoid the trap of performative inclusion?
Well, we get so caught up in giving a symbolic surface level gestures to each other. We end up being so shallow in how we cater for each other. We don't really fully engage because we don't have to engage. So we end up just trying to do enough to appease others, to make it look like we're trying. And I think for racial justice, we have to avoid those pitfalls that are ahead of us because for so many years we've been giving off gestures that we care. And what we really want to do is connect with those who really care, connect with our brothers and sisters, unite as one, recognize that we have more in common than against each other, and start to really embrace the simplicity of love, the simplicity of loving each other, the simplicity of just being real and true all the time. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
It would.
I think so too. So in this time of being on the Racial Justice Board, I think it's a time where we're trying to enhance our relationships. Firstly, on the board. Secondly, in the wider church. And Birmingham, multi-diverse Birmingham is. And what we really want to do is connect the diversities by connecting people with the things that we have in common. So we're an Anglican church, we're Christians, and we have more in common with each other than we tend to appreciate. So our journey is let's just squash symbolic surface level gestures and connect and love and work together for racial justice in Birmingham.
Thank you, Wayne. You spoke powerfully about transparency and developing clear accountability structures that help us learn and grow as we go. So what does real accountability look like in a church setting? And how do we ensure it's a tool for growth rather than a fear-based metric?
Now, that's a real good question, Kevin. And transparency is one of those lovely words. And how do we integrate transparency into our churchmanship, into our church life? Well, we have to recognize that we see what we see. And what we see generally reflects what's going on. So if we look and see that our leadership has a shortage of minority ethnic leaders, it's that way because of the choice for it to be like that. So transparency and developing clear accountability structures is, first of all, acknowledging that there's a challenge, acknowledging that what we see is true. There's an imbalance here, and questioning, do we want to do anything about it? Are we willing to make change in Birmingham? Are we willing to embrace our brothers and sisters and unite as one? Are we going to be that church that worships and glorifies and connect together as one? Are we going to be that body? And, I think our challenge for transparency is recognizing that one body means that we have so much that we can connect with, that we can relate with, that we have in common. So that's really trying to implement structures that help us to break down these barriers of divide and recognize that we're actually stronger with each other, that united, that we really stand and really can make a difference, and we can be really effective if we're united. And divided, we continue on that journey of, pretending, of symbolic surface level gestures, and that only divides us, and that doesn't unite us, and that doesn't help us to enjoy fellowship, which I think that's what we're called to do.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Those are really positive and encouraging statements, so thank you. Next, I want to talk about a culture of equity and not just initiatives. So you wrote, ultimately, my hope is that our work will not only respond to injustice, but help shape systems where equity becomes part of our shared culture. And that's actually a profound shift from repair to reimagining. So I'd like to ask, what does it take to build that kind of culture inside the church?
I think it starts back to basics in saying, well, okay, where are we right now? Let's start at the bottom and say, we've been talking about racial inclusion, we've been talking about racial injustice, we've been talking about equity and working together, and we've been talking for a long time. So we obviously are looking at and trying to focus right now on the Lament to Action report. And I think part of the report is saying that, listen, let's look again at each other. Let's have a look at our situation and let's start again. What does that mean? I think the first thing is to acknowledge that injustice is taking place. Our first protocol is to say, is this a fair system? Are we acknowledging that change is required? Are we acknowledging that we can change and make a difference? We can be more inclusive. We can be more encouraging. We can change the face of how Birmingham Diocese looks. We're a multi-diverse community, but it's not reflected in the diocese. So why is that? And when we ask that question and start to answer it and start to look around our establishments and say, where are we here? If each establishment was to question, how are we showing justice in our church? What type of sermons do we get? what is the bias of our photos and pictures in our Sunday school? If we start to question, does any influence from the UK global majority, the minority ethnic, are they reflected in our churchmanship in any way? And if it's not, is it okay that they're not reflected? So back to what you're sharing about the culture of fairness, of equity, and we've been having new initiatives for forever and a day. Oh, it's Racial Justice Sunday, and let's maybe get someone of color to front it. But actually, we're going back to these gestures, these symbolic surface level gestures, which actually mean nothing. In fact, it doesn't change the way we look and operate with racial justice. It changes nothing. So it's really important for individuals, for churches together, for ministers, for us all together to say, is this fair? We're going out and we're looking at making difference to various people that are challenged in our communities, but we're not looking home. We're not looking at the congregation and saying, could that person read? Could that person also share prayers? Could that person be a leader in the church? Could that person be on the PCC? We're actually looking around where we are right now and making changes and accepting that we are doing things or we're not. So the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge that we need help and we're willing to do something about it.
Okay, thanks very much, Wayne. I want to just touch on capacity building for clergy and lay leaders now. You've said that building the capacity of local clergy and lay leaders is a key priority. So what gaps are you seeing, and what are some of the most urgent needs in equipping our leaders for this work?
In the bio, it mentioned the men's fellowship, and there's all sorts of fellowship that's required. And actually, when I was growing up, one of the sayings that we were brought up on is that iron sharpens iron, and how important it is for us to gather together, to work together, to empower each other. And capacity building for clergy, it's an overwhelming job that requires a moment of togetherness and shared experiences, because that's kind of vital to how we survive being in ministry, is that we're able to work with others around us and remember that ministry is just not for one individual, but for all of us. So capacity building for clergy and lay leaders really, I think, is key, that we have time together, not learning something new, not learning a new scripture, but actually implementing the scriptures that we've learned in terms of how do we love each other? How do we connect with each other? How can we grow together as a team? How can we grow our ministry together? Is there anything that we can share with one another that makes ministry fun and joyous and, what it's supposed to be? Should ministry be anything other than fun, joy, love? I can't see it any other way. And I think that's if there's a shortfall, it's the gaps is that we're not connecting enough with one another because we're overwhelmed with work. And what we need to do is share the work with more of our lay people, encourage them to step up, empower them, and enjoy ministry together.
Wayne, do you think there's a fear of sharing power with our UKME GMH people, whether they're lay or clergy? Do you think that's something that's an issue?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we all fear change. Who wants change to take place? And don't forget, we were talking about the visual earlier. We see And many who work within our diocese see the Church of England in a particular way. So, unfortunately, it's not seen that anybody else should be in that role that doesn't look a particular type of way. So, yes, there's a challenge. Yes, there's fear, because we always fear the unknown. What are they going to be like? Are they going to love? Are they going to scream? Will I understand them? Take some time to talk to them. Take some time to walk the walk with them. And then find out that, wow, we have so much in common. Why was I fearful? Yes, Kevin, I do believe there is a fear. And the only way to overcome it is to encourage and empower lay, UK minorities, and to come together and acknowledge that ministry is not just for anyone, but for all of us.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Thank you. In your statement with West Midlands Racial Justice Initiative, you closed it with a beautiful line, and it said, "I look forward to leading with integrity, collaboration, and bold vision, not by my strength alone, but with God's help and the wisdom of our communities." So I wanted to ask, what does spiritual leadership mean to you in the context of racial justice? And how do you personally stay grounded in this work?
What does spiritual leadership mean to me? And you said in the context of social justice in particular, I think realizing that the scriptures are real. And actually, one of the things that we've been sharing amongst the groups that we connect with is being a living testimony. And rather than accolades or whatever people might say, why don't you see me and know who I am? Because I've chosen to be a living testimony. I've chosen to be that person that walks with integrity. I'm going to do it at home. I'm going to do it at work. I'm going to do it at church. Wherever I am, I'm just going to be the same person. And trying to walk with that type of integrity enables and empowers others around you to kind of lean into their own integrity, to understand their own values, to be strong in who they are. Because when we see others around us who are not trying to perform, but just to be who they are, and enjoying the very fact that they're breathing air again, because it's God's gift to us that we're alive today. And, you know, the joy of living, the joy of connecting, the joy of actually not finding, I'd say, looking again. So sometimes we have a conversation and first impression is like, but give it a second chance and a third chance, only to find out, wow, some of the best friends that I have, probably I didn't like at first sight or at first listening to, and you're thinking, I don't think so. But the more we delved in, the more we found out is the more we realized, wow, you know, I took the time to get to know. And, you know, spiritual leadership is leaning onto that inner God. Greater is he that is within me than is in the world. And realizing that, wow, that God lives within me. I'm going to shine that light. I'm going to live that life. So for racial justice, in the context of racial justice, it's really about just recognizing and pulling on board all those who are like-minded and want change to take place. Empowering and encouraging those who are just afraid to step out because people might be upset with them, when actually you're doing the right thing. You're being inclusive. This is what God's called us to do, to have that type of fellowship. So spiritual leadership is a oneness, is a togetherness. It's not just one person on their own. It's how we connect together. That's what makes us strong. That's what is going to change the Birmingham diocese, is because of togetherness and a oneness and a strength of direction. We're all going to just know that what we want is fairness, and justice, and we're in it together. And because we're in it together, it becomes so much more simpler. And it works. Everybody knows that togetherness worked. We all know that. On our own, we actually will only falter. And that spiritual connection really is heightened by togetherness.
Okay, thank you. And just briefly, how do you stay personally grounded in this work? How do you stay grounded when you're doing this work of racial justice for Birmingham?
I think, to be honest, it's connection. There's some people that I connect with that are passionate about racial justice, and they would love change. But the difficulty is what we're going to do. Are we going to get this change? Are we going to implement change in Birmingham? And staying grounded is like, I can't even imagine what can take you off the ground, because we've achieved nothing. We're in a pretty poor position. And if that's not ground leveling, I don't know what is. That we have bringing about reports for years and years and years, and nothing's ever really happened with them. So what makes you grounded is actually realizing that nothing hasn't been achieved yet. So if that can't ground you, Kev, I'm not sure what can.
Quite. Thank you. Let's talk about Racial Justice Sunday, which is coming up on the 8th of February. So what does this Sunday represent to you? And what do you hope churches across the region will reflect on, preach about, and act on this year?
Well, what does it mean to me? It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for acknowledgement that racial justice is a necessity, and we should be all together striving toward this one goal. It represents to me, like I said, that opportunity to do something again, for someone in the church to say, well, okay, can we talk about this again? I'm hoping that the churches across the region will reflect on it. And more so, I really would like the churches around the regions to kind of say, where are we in this church right now? It's Racial Justice Sunday. Where are we? What do we do? Do we on those days have tokenism? Do we put someone up the front and say, okay, we've done our bit? So for me, if the churches could just question, what is it that racial justice means to them? And can anybody preach on racial justice? And can anybody care about justice in the world? Well, I certainly hope so. But I would love to know that the foundation of the establishment, the churches, and wherever people are sharing on this day, it would be just amazing if, first of all, they could just look around them and acknowledge the room that they're in and see if it looks in any way like a place that's welcoming and comforting and loving and embraces other races. That would be amazing.
Thank you. As chair, you've laid out a clear and hopeful agenda. But what does success look like, not just in metrics, but in people, in relationships, and in spirit?
You know what? It's really important that the love of God from within us is brought into every situation. And we take the time to encourage. We take the time to kind of love people on a journey. So some people are just not used to encountering with the minority ethnics of Birmingham, of the UK. And the more we engage, the more we fellowship, is the more we see transitions take place. For me, what does success look like? Success for me is the church is just standing up and saying, I just want to have a look at myself. I want to have a look at our space and find out, what are we doing? That's success for me. If all the churches in Birmingham was to answer that question, what are we doing here regarding racial justice? That's a win.
Thank you. And finally, Wayne, for listeners, whether they be faith leaders, congregants, or community members, what's the one thing you hope they'll take away from today? And what one next step can they take towards building a more just and equitable church?
The one thing, I suppose the most important thing is self-analysis. The most important thing is for self-acknowledgement. So really important for me would be that all who hear this podcast would reflect and say, well, the establishment that I am worshipping in and serving, how have we looked within ourselves at what racial justice means? Is there anything that we can do? And just that self-analysis would be absolutely amazing. So being humble enough to question what they're doing, being clear enough to address it, and have the courage to embrace your fellow brothers and sisters and love them and encourage them and grow together with them. That's what I would love to happen.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of the second part of that question, what sort of next step can they take towards building a more just and equitable church?
I think I would love to say that if they will definitely watch this space and listen out for the changes that Birmingham Diocese will be implementing in a very short space, and just take it on board, walk with it, and help it to grow, that will be a big thing for us to happen.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Thank you. And I want to thank you not just for your time, but also for the way that you lead with humility, clarity, and courage. So, to all our listeners, this has been Seasons of Justice. I'm Kevin Thompson. Stay rooted in faith, stay bold in action, and remember, justice isn't seasonal, it's sacred.